Um, Greetings in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator. I'm Andre, and I'm joined here today with Peter Sternlicht and Simon Michaux, and we'll be doing a program on transition and things like that. Peter, did you want to introduce yourself for those who aren't
Sure,
familiar? Mm-hmm. Go
sure.
ahead.
Peter Sternlight. I live in Hawaii. I have a nonprofit called Sustainable Energy Hawaii that I've been involved with for going on 5 years, and our goal is to wake up our legislators here in our state um, so that our current predicament is considered to be more than carbon emissions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Somewhere along the line, supply chain has to become part of it.
Very good. All right, and I trust everyone's familiar with Simon and Iver, and so we were going to start this with a brief introduction. Here, let me just try to do that to get the presentation shared, so you guys can see. And it's called transition. There it is. Okay, can you see that?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, this is just kind of to cover the basics for everyone who's watching. All right. So GDP, energy growth dangers. So if we continue, like there's, always the possibility that we will continue doing either the fossil fuels or the nuclear or anything like that, and that we will. And if we do manage to have 2.8% GDP growth, and GDP growth is interlinked with energy growth. And so, and energy produces heat, and the amount that can dissipate into space is limited. And so our Earth temperature, like the oceans will boil in 300 years, and then we will be as hot as the sun within 800 years if we manage to survive that GDP growth. So basically, unlimited growth is not an option. But the good news is that we have limited reserves of oil and nuclear and things like that, and we had 1985 was peak reserves, and since then we've been discovering less than we've been producing. We've been producing more than we've been discovering, and it's been going steadily down. And there's various projections, but by 2035 we'll be producing about as much conventional as in 1965. And so we know that net energy peaked in 2015 because food prices and food insecurity has been rising since then. It was going down until 2015, and then since then it's been rising. And this is all on track. And then, of course, we don't have enough renewables and enough minerals to transition to renewables in anything near the time frame. In terms of the renewables that are available, the most viable are firewood, if we grow our own coppice yards, or hydroelectric, whereas nuclear is not really renewable. And then you can see here the EROI decline. So the school systems in North America have been in shambles for a while now, and the healthcare, as you know, in the 2020s, early 2020s, they weren't working so well. And we've had those farmer riots in Europe, so that means their EROI is close to 7. Not yet at 7 because their industrial farmers are still able to work, but maybe 7.5 or 8 or something like that. But we'll see how that goes. And then nuclear reserves has limits. So right now demand is projected to outstrip supply in the near future, and then it takes billions of years to make those nuclear reserves, but the rates that we're using them will be done within centuries, and it'll end up being a blip, just like the fossil fuels. So we have to learn how to moderate our usage of nuclear fuel if we want to, have it for thousands or millions of years. And so resilience theory Basically, there's cycles of civilizations. They've happened many times. Basically, there's the exploitation phase. In a way, we are in that exploitation phase with fossil fuels and nuclear reserves right now. And then at some point, it reaches a conservation phase. So usually the exploitation was of trees. And then after you run out of the resource, like such as trees, then there's the release phase. But at least with trees, you can go to the reorganization phase of planting trees. And Egypt was the only civilization with a tree planting program, and they were also the only one that survived the Bronze Age collapse. And so, because they managed to plant enough trees to go back into an exploitation phase. All right, and so the most probable future timelines, based on some studies, it's like urban salvage economy, because we won't be able to produce enough food in the cities, but there will still be lots of wreckage and things like that that we can use to harvest. And so that's one viability where people would go in and with a hacksaw they would like take a piece of a car and then take it to a rural area where a blacksmith can turn it into a farm implement. And so the rustic Amish life is viable. Also, the indigenous hunter-gatherer lifestyle is viable, but only in those areas with very large existing forests, like in southern Asia, Southeast Asia, and northern Canada and things like that. And then there's also the possibility of food forest communities where we grow our own food forests, and that would be kind of managed. And then understanding carrying capacity. So you need about 1 global hectare per person. This is assuming 6 months of growing season and at least 500 millimeters of annual rainfall. And then you can grow your own firewood with coppices. And then this, how this can align with the province. And this is a sample. So if you have a rural block over here, you can see there's these little hamlets, and each one has about 10 to 15 houses, and that's about 60 to 100 people there, which is optimal for economies of scale. And then in the center you have a biogas facility, and then using that biogas you can make glass and blacksmithing and lime making, because we cannot grow enough wood to do industrial processes, only for home heating and cooking. So those coppice yards, they are not viable for industrial purposes, but biogas is, and that would be out of people's poop and food waste. And so sustainable energy production, so solar, wind for residential or hamlet, bio-CNG for the village level, and then FT biogasoline for the neighborhood, and thorium nuclear at the municipal level. And this is for making like solar panels, computer chips, things that need way more energy than even biogas could reasonably give you. And then, so Simon often talks about how it's good to do at the county level. And so it's just showing how this plan is very compatible. And counties can also focus on radios and fiber optics and things like that. And in terms of clients, like Simon Michaux wants to do that city in Peru, but on a more local level, family offices are one of the best sources of funding for this kind of project. Family offices are basically for wealthy families. They have a single office which does all of these different things. And so this investment strategy and asset allocation, the family offices are multi-generational, because it's a family like the Rockefellers or the JP Morgans or whoever else. And there's many smaller families like the MacArthurs around here. And they have family offices, and there's like directories that you can get. And then if you find the family office, you can contact them and propose this deal of a sustainable, multi-generational kind of unit. And some of them might take you up on it. And so, and this is kind of the discussion place. All right. Did you guys have any commentary on that?
Yeah, can I get a copy? Can I get a copy of that?
Yeah.
Because since we spoke last, and this is going to make Peter laugh, Talking to you, Andrew, you've convinced us to actually add an extra scenario to the Hawaii report.
Oh, great.
We found someone in Hawaii who's actually sort of doing the regenerative agricultural system, and we're going to talk to them and look at if we were to replicate that across the island chain, what would that look like?
Wow, that's amazing.
The other thing I could add is work I've been doing in the last couple of weeks, what I call the purple transition. One of the technologies in there might be useful to you, and that is the burning of iron powder. And if we get around to it, I can show you what I mean by that, but that all of a sudden becomes a whole lot easier.
Right, right. Yeah, my understanding, though, is that still requires a lot of energy to burn the iron powder. Oh, to make it.
No. It once it's actually made into a powdered form, yes, it does take a lot of energy, but you can recycle it. And the recycling of it, I don't know how much energy. This is still, I'm trying to work out how much energy that would take. But it's possible to recycle. You do need specialist equipment to get the fire going in the first place, but it can happen at pilot scale. So put it under the flag of technology that might work. It's got less bottlenecks in front of it than other things.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Anyway.
And I know Iver. Did anyone have any other comments on this presentation so far? Before we move on to Iver's presentation?
Well, I did have a question. The number of people that you're supporting with this system, do you have it actually broken down to the amount of work that they would have to do on a weekly basis?
Yes. Across
all seasons?
Well, I haven't yet done it on a weekly basis across all seasons, but I do have here a transition plan of the electricity requirements and the mineral requirements. But I did also do, at some point, I did the hours. So the number of hours for, so this is for the food forest system. It would require about 20 to 25 hours a week of per capita work.
Brilliant. Would I be able to get a copy of that in the form of a Word document that I can sort of do it? And if we reference it, if we use it, we'll reference you. Okay,
sure. Sounds good. I'll send the links in the chat, and then I'll try to find that one where I did the calculations of the hours as well. Basically, the primitive hunter-gatherers, they actually work about 15 hours a week because they don't have to do any planting or anything. And then the slash and burn agriculture, they work closer to the 20 hours a week. They're called horticulturalists, so they're gardeners. And then the regular peasants that are just plant-based peasants, so that they grow wheat or other crops just during the summer, like the medieval peasants, they worked about 25 to 30 hours. And then modern OECD people work 35 hours on average. And then a modern OECD farmer, like the kinds that are protesting, they work on average 60 hours a week.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, but yeah, I'll send those links as well. Sure. Did anyone else have any questions for this before we move on to Iver's presentation?
Well, I love the different possibilities. It's great to have different possibilities, really. You know, for what might work, you know?
For sure.
I often think of that, too. Like, could a low-energy world work? And I think it can, theoretically.
Of course it can. Of course it can work. The question then becomes, can we actually... what else can we keep going? Like these low energy world will work because that's what we used to do. But can we also maintain other systems?
Yeah, no one's going to like it, and it means changing the world so that it makes sense. But you know, nobody likes it making sense, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, where we are in Hawaii, it's there's a very different mentality because we live on islands, and so we're self-contained already. But you know, my kids live in Los Angeles in the Phoenix area, and people hate change. They just don't like changing. And my big concern about transitioning to a low energy society is that conventional wisdom has told us that an economy grows and that what we should expect. That's what is normal. And, you know, people also don't like being lied to.
No, they don't. They really don't.
And so, you know, the United States is highly populated with some very ill-informed people who have a lot of guns, and I'm not real confident our transition is going to be peaceful.
No, even the one in just a few months, in like 6 months here, it might not be that
Yeah.
peaceful.
Yeah, because there's many questions about legitimacy and things like this, even though it hasn't even happened yet.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
We'll see. But my little thing is just about what's going on now.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, are there pictures?
Yeah, I'm just getting your presentation ready right now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of I just went to the eclipse yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
and even though it's only less than an hour and a half away, it took us 5 hours to get back in a car. And at one point, yeah, so many people. At one point, somebody got dropped off in their from their car, and they were just walking ahead, and they were going to get picked up by their friends later, and they were moving way faster than us. So this system doesn't actually work all that well when it gets overloaded with vehicles, you know, everybody in their individual vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, you know, people are not going to like the change, but a lot of it does not work at all.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
No, yeah, and you'll find that that is human nature, and that's everywhere.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's everywhere. And we like the convenience of being able to be in our own vehicle, but it ain't gonna hold. And anyway, here's my thing is about sea level rise. And this is the sea surface temperatures have been going up, and they've been going up and up. This was back in 2023. And see, the sea level temperatures were going up in 2023. They were just way up above everything that everybody had ever seen before. And we thought that was a big, you know, a big problem, really. That was like a crazy big problem. We were watching the buoys out in the Gulf of Maine and different places, and they were way up even early on. And then guess what? Now we're in 2024, and in 2024, the sea level anomaly has been way up over anything that ever existed before. Now it's coming back down, but you know, it was a pretty crazy little bump above anything that anybody's ever seen before. And the interesting thing about, you know, when you add degree Celsius to the temperature that's already there, storms become 7% stronger. So the crazy thing is, we're already, let's say we're at 1.5. I think it's 1.58 or something, which is crazy. But what do you call it? That adds about 10% to every storm. Every storm is 10% stronger than it was, and you can really feel it here in Maine because every storm packs a bigger punch, more energy, more liquid, etc. Every single one, and we've been above that that limit, which you can see that yellow line is, you know, 1.5, right? Paris limit,
Yes.
1.5.
Yep. Paris limit 1.5. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, remember when we decided, like, this is it. This is the red line. We're not going to cross it. A lot of little countries were very upset even with 1.5 because that meant that they were going to get all washed out and they were going to disappear, right? Mm-hmm. Well, that's what the agreed upon limit was. We've been at that limit. We've been above that in just temperatures for like a year and something now. So we've already passed the red line we were never going to pass. And then meanwhile, it's I think the next one is COP 29. So we've had 29 years of these conferences where we decided we're going to do something about this. We're really going to do something about this time. No, we're really going to do something about it this time. No, I know we're going to go, we're going to really do something. And we haven't done anything. So here it says March 23rd registered 1.46 C, and the current 365-day running average is 1.57 C. So basically that means we have been running hot. Like you think about let's say if you have a fever or something, if you're like 2.5 or 3 degrees warm, with our system, that's pretty hot. That's a pretty hot fever. And we've been running a fever for, like definitely the last year or two. We're way above what the doctor says we'd be at. So this, right before Christmas, we had a little storm that we called the Grinch storm, right? And what the Grinch storm did was there was 6 inches of rain on top of about a foot or 2 of snowpack that melted all at once. And so it sent huge amounts of water down the Kennebec River, which is where we live, which of course the electricity went out for 2 or 3 days just for us, and it almost never goes out where we are. And it cut out any chance of going across any bridge within about 25 miles. So all the bridges were gone, no electricity, you couldn't go anywhere, no electricity. And so of course, what did we do? We went down to visit the flood. Everybody was down there. It was like a party down there watching the flood. And there was somebody, they're trying to renovate a building nearby. And of course, they put all their materials in giant containers, like, the kind of containers that come in a container ship. They put all their materials in there. And the materials, you see those boxes to the left of that building you can see? Yeah, right where the cursor is. Those were floating around and kind of bashing against each other. And we kind of thought they were going to go over the lip and end up in the river, but they were all bouncing around up there. And now, of course, the developers I was thinking, if you're spending millions of dollars, wouldn't you check and see if there are flood possibilities in your area? Well, they didn't really get a chance to do that. So now they want the town to pay, to kick in to help them build their condos and things. So I'm not too thrilled about it personally. Maybe I'm just not in the right spirit, but so this is going to start happening. This is a 1,000-year flood. This is the second 1,000-year flood we've had in 50 years.
Wow.
What are you going to say, Andre?
I was just saying that condominiums are not very sustainable. Like, they're going to be just scrapped later, so it's kind of a waste of energy.
Well,
and
especially
resources.
this particular spot, because it obviously floods. The whole place floods, so that's not so fun for the condo owners. So I don't know. I think we're going to keep doing crazy things until we can't do them anymore. And now we have the Swans Island Ferry Terminal, and you can't really see. I guess if you blow it up a little, you'll be able to see. This ferry terminal washed out 3 times this winter. Now the problem is that's the only way on and off of the ferry, and there was a huge storm surge. And it washed out the only way to get to the ferry, but it also washed out 9 wharves on Swans Island. So a wharf is a big thing. I used to own a wharf quarter share of a wharf on Swans Island. And what actually happened was the whole wharf disappeared, including huge piers, giant hemlock timbers. The wharf itself was covered with lobster traps. The whole thing was sent out to sea.
Oh.
And the reason I sold the thing,
So it got
I sold the thing.
It got dislocated and it went out to sea. I thought it was just covered with water temporarily.
No, it lifted up and floated away. And the reason I got rid of the thing was, I'm a retired teacher, so they'd keep saying, hey guys, let's all chip in $1,000 and we'll build new stairs or we'll get a new float or something, right? And I realized I can't do this, right? Well, this time it floated away, and then they're all getting a bill for $600 each to clean up the damage. That's before you even build it back again.
Wow.
And so they're giving expedited permits, and you're supposed to rebuild 4 feet taller than any wharf so far. So you rebuild 4 feet taller. And let me tell you, 4 feet taller is a serious job. That ramp that you can see, cars drive on it and then they go onto the ferry, right? Well, if you have to bring that thing up 4 feet, you have to bring up that whole ramp. You have to bring up every single thing. This is big money. You know, so we're working on trying to get a couple roads lifted on Swans Island. But if you're anywhere near the ocean, all of a sudden everything is a problem. Now, we had a huge storm, and the interesting thing about the storm was it was only as strong a storm as we had in 1978, which was the past record, right? So keep on the Swans Island there. But anyway, the one up top there.
Oh, okay. This one?
Yeah. The thing about it is that storm that we had in 1978 almost came up to this. Well, this new record broke the old record by 4.8 inches. Now, guess how much sea level rise we've had since 1978?
How much? 4.8 inches?
4.8 inches.
Oh, okay.
So so it just shows you this was just a run-of-the-mill storm. And since then, we've had 2 or 3 other flooding events this winter. So the sea level is just coming up relentlessly. Now, the scary thing is, by 2050, they think it's going to come up by a foot. So what that means is, you think about it, 12 inches in, let's say, 5 years, let's say 24 years, 12 inches in 20, you can figure it out pretty quickly. You realize we are not going to be moving in terms of inches per decade. We're going to be moving inches, what is that? Half an inch per year.
Oh, wow.
To get to a foot by 2050. And that's just the regular run-of-the-mill calculation. They think it's going to rise by a meter or 3-4 feet by the end of the century. So
Wow.
there's your 4 feet. So so the thing about it is when you rebuild something like this, a dock like this, it's a big, complicated thing, and it's going to last 75 years, right? Well, if it lasts 75 years, you've got to bring it up 4 feet. Right?
Yep.
So everything has to be lifted. All infrastructure has to be lifted by 4 feet. And now I guess we'll move on to the next slide, Andre.
Okay.
So here's Boston, which is a big, pretty big city on the East Coast. And this has been over the last, since 1600s, 1630, they have moved all this dirt, all this fill into the harbor to make these the light green area. See the light green area? They have basically put all that fill in there since 1650 to make all these parts of Boston. And that is a heavily, that's a city right now. Back Bay is a huge city. There's, the Red Sox stadium is back there. All the light green area is all fill. And it's all going to become water again in the next, 30, 40 years. And this is just a very typical city anywhere on the East Coast. I know Portland, Maine, they did the same thing, but they didn't do it since 1630. They did it in the last 30 years. They've decided to fill and redevelop a whole area of Portland, Maine, even though they knew that sea level has been going up an inch a decade. Since I came here in 60 years, I've seen it going up an inch a decade or near an inch a decade, right? Now it's accelerating. So the thing about it is, here are the planners. These are the people who are supposedly making plans, right? And they decided to rebuild a whole section of the city with fill in the last 30 years. It should have been obvious to them, and now guess what's happening? Every high tide, not every high tide, but most high tides, the water comes right in around the new businesses and buildings and office towers, etc., that they put in. So people are not that smart. They can't read the writing on the wall. But this is going to be every city, really every city in the world that's anywhere near sea level is going to be dealing with this. So, I mean, we have problems with peak oil. We have problems with climate change. But this is one that we've got to deal with. There's no way around it. or if you want to have a city, if you want to have a place there. And I don't know what to do. It's millions of, it's going to cost tons of, millions and billions of dollars. And there's no real solution except for raising it all. Anyway, that's my little thing about another thing. That's another, it's another little consequence of fossil fuel use.
The Netherlands is going to have their work cut out for them. Peter, did you?
They're not going to be able to do it. They'll probably have to either, I don't know what they're going to do. A lot of that is below sea level. And my relatives in Copenhagen, Denmark are going to have troubles. And hey, Stockholm, I don't know how, I've never been to Helsinki. I don't know how that's doing, but I know Stockholm has a lot of islands. It's a very low city.
All right. So did anyone have some commentary or questions for Iver?
Helsinki is a very, very low setting. Like there's not a lot of hills here. There's lots of islands. All the structures that are historical are still okay. Like I don't know if we had any sea level rise at all. I just haven't looked at that data. I just don't know. But if we did get like a sea level rise, then well, life would get interesting.
It's practically guaranteed. Have you guys heard about the Thwaites Glacier?
The Thwaites?
The Thwaites Glacier is a giant glacier in Antarctica, and the problem with it is you can only have about 300-foot cliffs of ice on the edge of the water. Well, this thing is like, a couple thousand feet tall of ice. And the problem is once it starts to fall, it falls into the water, falls until it, see that edge, that really tall edge there? It can't live over water more than 300 feet tall. So it's going to keep crumbling till it gets back to 300 feet. And the problem is all that's hanging over water, so it doesn't add to the sea level rise, but the stuff back behind it starts to tumble in once you've tumbled it into the water and melted it. It adds to sea level rise, and that could really punch sea level rise up. Well, you guys probably know this, right? And just this summer, they had a couple big chunks fall off, like, the size of Rhode Island or something. So that's the Thwaites ice tongue and the eastern ice shelf, but there's a lot of ice back behind it also.
And it's kind of sliding down into the ocean.
Yeah, and you see how tall it is. That tallness, that stuff can't hold. You can't have that right on the water edge. You can only have like 300 feet on the edge.
And how tall is it?
Keep tumbling. It's like thousands. It's like a couple thousand.
Wow.
So once it starts to tumble, then it's that's what everybody worries about. The marine ice cliffs.
587 meters, it says. 1,926 feet.
Yeah, 2,000. That's what I thought, around 2,000 feet. So then it's got to crumble down to 300 to make it a stable thing right on the water. So if that goes, then we got a lot of sea level rise. So that's the usual problem. So, so I that I am a big advocate of using the ocean and using water to move things around. But this is going to be a big problem because wherever you meet the sea, you've got to have a wharf that will work. So. You got to raise everything. You got to get that interface between land and the sea has got to be, taken care of. You got to figure out a way to do it. And I personally, okay, real obvious solution. What about floating docks and floating houses, etc.? They have this in the Netherlands. You just have everything float. It's kind of a simple idea, but it might make sense. Everything floats.
It seems that would make the logistics, especially if you're dealing with a large population, much more complex.
Oh yeah. I kind of think the whole thing, the logistics of the whole thing is trouble.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at this, and I go, why are we? I mean, you were mentioning earlier that we see this happening, we know this is happening. but the decision making doesn't match what we know. And so I asked myself why. And, so for instance, when I'm not a highly educated guy, but I still, I look at historical data and stuff like that, and I ask myself, why are we doing this? And what I see is that what we're chasing is short term, and the people with the money are looking for, the window within which profits are supposed to be made, and the definition for how business works and the fiduciary responsibility that corporate governance has is to shareholders. And the expectations have been going up and up and up. And so what we've been doing is we've been chasing GDP, and the rest of it be damned, because I'm looking for numbers that span 90 days, not 90 years. So, and so that's really the challenge, because the people with the money still think in old ways. There are a few who see what's going on, and they realize that they have enough to be able to change what they do. But by and large, until there is a massive crisis of our own making, we're just going to keep chasing GDP. I could be wrong, but that's my sense.
Well, I kind of feel like this is the massive crisis right now. We're in it. The thing is, on Swans Island, for example, there is no other place to go. That's it. All their wharves, their wharves have washed away, so they can't. It's very hard to do commercial activity, etc. And the whole city of Boston, a large percentage of it is in trouble.
So
I think we're already there.
I managed to get a map here. So this is what it looks like now. And then after 1 meter of sea rise, well, this is what it would look like.
Wow.
Yeah. There goes the Back Bay. Back Bay turns into the Back Bay again.
Right. Yeah, all of this area over here gets flooded and things like that.
I guess the one good thing about that is that what's going to disappear is where all the big money is, and so they're going to, it should start to wake some people up who, a few weeks too late, but, that's the only silver lining I see right at this particular moment.
So Simon, did you have some ideas, alternatives to the GDP?
Yeah, I actually put a financial model forward once to an audience of politicians, and I didn't get burned at the stake, but they did laugh at me. I propose an entirely different model of finance that is, when we knock out the fiat-based currency, we bring in a new currency that's actually, the old way we used to do things was a gold-backed currency. Okay, great. Now, that might be solid and everything, but it's not fast enough for the modern world. You need an electronic component to it, so international transactions can actually happen fast enough. So, I propose that gold is actually not what we need, because we've got a lot of work to do. Everything needs to be rebuilt. And most nation states don't have enough gold. What they do have is resources, mineral resources. So I proposed a basket of mineral resources, which is collateral to back the value of the currency of each country, which can then be balanced up against each other in an audited kind of way as we consume and manage those resources.
Yeah, right. I think that
is,
audited is an important point there, because when we started doing that OPEC stuff, people just we just magically found 30% more reserves.
Yeah, they used to make shit up. It was appalling. But so what I'm sort of saying there is because of the deceit that's actually part and parcel of the modern world and everything, and the U.S. Federal Reserve's never been audited. it's got to be done where anyone in the world who's actually part of that system can audit anyone else. And so we're talking about some kind of blockchain technology or something like blockchain, and it doesn't have to be that large. Because you don't, when people try and do these things, the level of complexity is amazing. You can actually scale back the complexity by measuring things in a ledger. Every nation state has a ledger, and for every year, every year when we do a tax return, that ledger can be updated. Anyway, the implication there was we tether our money to reality, and we should tether us to reality with what we actually need to do. Not, this is the old what you want, what you need, and what you do become the same thing. That was the premise behind it. So if you did go down that path, what is economic value now? And so what I see coming, for example, is the formation of a different business entity that's unprecedented, that we haven't seen before. Like the idea of the corporation appeared out of about 1890 or whatever it is, and then they decided a corporation had the same rights as a person. So coming out of the American Civil War, most of the court cases heard were not about slavery at all, but about the rights of the corporation. Guys.
Yeah.
Anyway,
It's true.
so what that meant though was it was a new era, and the corporation took over, and that became the dominant institution. I think for what the institution that's coming in now, if we're in a world that's actually sort of contracting in resource pie and in particular energy, then the idea of growth and profit all of a sudden is going to be very hard to do. So in that environment, the institution of the corporation will eat itself. So for its own survival, it will morph into something else. And that and there's several options going forward there. But what we will see, I believe, is a social contract that is unprecedented. It'll have elements of everything in our past, but when you put the bits together, it's going to be unlike anything we've seen before, and we've got no idea how to manage it, because when it arrives, it goes, what the hell is that? For example, just to start a mine site, you need to spend about, say, $4 or $5 billion US, like a big copper mine in South America. Now, mining's gone through several eras of business model, and it used to, in the good old days, it used to be just a couple of guys get together with picks and shovels down at the creek, and they'd get to work, and you'd actually walk away with physical metal in bags, like concentrated ore. Right, then it actually went to the point where you needed to build infrastructure, so you needed the backing of a rich person. And so one rich person could back a mine, or maybe say 3 or 4 rich people could back a single mine. Then the mines grew so large you needed a corporation. You're talking millions. Well, now the mines are so large that they're actually backed by a hedge fund, and the mining corporation puts up about 30% of the money. Wow. So mining is now dominated by banking, which is why we have this short-term mentality that's crept in. It's no longer about resource stewardship, it's about the financial bottom line. And that's how that's happened over the last 30 years. What I believe is coming is a partnership. And currently, when you start a mine, it is you need the consortium would then approach the local government of the target site and say, we want you to build us some infrastructure, roads, railways, shipping ports, loading facilities, all that. And they would convince the government to pay for all this stuff in exchange for opening up the area for more industrialization. So governments are kind of like the silent partner for a lot of mines at the moment. But I think they're going to put their foot down and say, we want to be an active partner. And so there's going to be a three-way partnership between the mining corporation that does the mining, the local government, and all the various forms associated with that, and a banking hedge fund that's going to come from it. The banking hedge fund's got the cash, no one else does. The corporation can do the mining because no one else can. But the government's got the attention span to run this operation for 40, 50 years, which is what it will now take for some of these mines to operate. Because the NPV tool only has a window of 5 to 8 years. And anything outside of that, it doesn't really take part in the calculation. So the NPV tool's not very good at actually sort of matching the value of a mine or a deposit anymore. And so what I'm sort of saying is we're going to see a different series of business entities that we've never seen before, and they might scare the shit out of us. Because yeah.
Yeah, I've got a question, Simon. Have you, are you familiar with what's called infrastructure as a service?
No, but I'm part of a UN group, United Nations, that is trying to actually do resource as a service. And I can imagine it. Describe what you mean.
Okay, so for instance, there's a company here called Sustainability Partners, and it's come in and said, we'll build you, they're saying to the government, we'll build you a wastewater treatment plant. And essentially you sign a PPA with Sustainability Partners. They will build and operate and maintain this plant. So essentially you have a corporation that is now going to own government infrastructure. Okay, it's they again, they sign a PPA. We had a so what they're doing is, so the government doesn't have to put up the money up front. They basically rent it. So they're coming in, and for instance, they're replacing the vehicle fleet here in Hawaii, the small the light duty vehicles. And interestingly enough, they're replacing county cars and state cars with Teslas.
Okay.
So saying that they've done their research and they find that that they maintain their value and blah 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 blah. Anyhow, and so they're also coming in and they're contracting to put in the charging infrastructure. And I'm just wondering, I mean, if what you're talking about when you say governments are going to become a partner, I'm seeing this this entity sort of flow where I'm seeing the government essentially becoming even more beholden to private interests.
Yeah. So it depends on, you imagine a corporation or a private government. A private company.
Yeah.
That for 10 years in a row, not only did not show a profit, but contracted in size. What happens to that private company?
Goes bankrupt.
Right. So that's the environment I could see happening, where what we now call the conventional private company will have to evolve into something else. But the government can survive in that environment. What I'm saying is the balance of power is going to shift to this new entity. It's not going to be government in the same form that it is now, and it won't be private companies in the same form. It'll be the formation of something new. And the people on the ground aren't necessarily going to like it, because it's going to look a bit like, the behavior of these entities might be a bit of a problem.
Yeah.
And so we would probably start seeing the rise of community co-ops, collective, credit unions, screw you hippie, we don't want anything to do with you.
Right.
Whereas at the moment, we have this seamless system where right across the whole system, all companies and governments and entities talk to each other as if it's no big thing. I can see that breaking up. So Andrew's idea of, right, everything over that hill is ours, we're going to grow our own food, you all can fuck right off. Right. That's the environment I believe we're actually sort of moving into, whereas it's almost tribal. Like the elements of tribal, the elements of feudalism, it's going to be a big old mess. And to try and describe it now, people would look at me and says, "Yeah, no, you're not wrapped too tight, mate. Yeah, no, that's not possible."
Yeah, the idea of business being stakeholder based versus shareholder based is, I mean, I know that's where it's headed, but I can't even really define what it would look like. But it has to become more stakeholder based, because they're going to be storming the castle.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was reading a book, Seeing the Forest and the Trees, and it's a multidisciplinary thing. Anyways, they said that in terms of forest maintenance, one of the most important things is where stakeholders are allowed to participate in the making of the rules, and there's like public consultation because they're the ones that are implementing the rules, and so it's important for them to know have an input in making those rules.
It's why democracy is a design condition, design requirement, not just a good idea.
Yeah, and in terms of what you were saying about that, things are getting kind of more. I think the world is getting bigger as energy depletes, because when energy is like super abundant, we had the Concorde, 3 hours was the distance between Toronto and the UK, but now it's 6 hours, and and the ships are going slower too through the ocean, because they use less fuel if they don't go as fast, and so the distances are. I mean, while the physical distances are the same, how fast you get there is increasing. And also, like Iver was saying, with both traffic and the road qualities going down, and the Baltimore Bridge collapsed recently, and they're saying maybe in 10 years we'll think about rebuilding it.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I've noticed, or that that makes sense to me, is that we measure energy over. We measure it within a flow rate, time. We measure barrels per day, kilowatts per hour, et cetera, and when I see, for instance, our government here in Hawaii making plans for how to power their economy in the future, it's sort of like they're pursuing it with, like the sun has infinite power. That's great. What's the flow rate? The Alberta oil sands has more oil than Saudi Arabia. Cool. What's the flow rate? Right now, the consumption flow rate demand is 102 million barrels a day. Okay, and as you discussed in one of the previous meetings, you have a particular subset of that, diesel, that has a certain level of importance in terms of the flow rate of stuff that isn't just energy, but it's food and goods and what we run our businesses on. So I mean, that's one of the things I try to, and it's like people are looking at me, they just don't, I mean, it's like a lot of the emails I send to people, I hope will finally start to listen. I just go, time is not on our side. It doesn't have the emotion when I write it down, but time has to be something that we start thinking about. And I think that's what you're talking about, is the fact that we're going to slow down, and that's not the way the powers that be want to run things. They want to speed it up, and that takes energy.
Well, they are using the private jets, right? So
lucky them.
The elites are scaling up their lavishness, but unfortunately, also the divide is getting bigger, and this is also something we know from the book Dark Age America by John Michael Greer. And he was saying that this is a typical pre-collapse scenario where the wealthy, as things start to deteriorate, they isolate themselves from the general populace by, getting their gated communities and, their private jets and things like that. And so there's a greater and greater disconnect between what they think is happening and what's really happening. And then at some point, their kind of orders and commands just stop making sense. And their henchmen, their quality of life is so low, they just walk off the job. And then the head falls off.
Well, you've also got a situation like, take a look at when the Shah fell in Iran. I mean, here's a guy that had the army that had everything, and he barely made it up the stairway to his 747 that was half filled with his wife's shoes. So, I mean, it's like at some point, they're just simply not going to take it anymore.
Yeah. Well, I live on sort of a gated community in the summer, and it used to be just like a place, right, that we would go to. And, it's an island off the coast, right? And now these like rich people have moved in, and the first thing they do within like about 30 seconds of talking to me is they try to like figure out a way to tell me how rich they are, right? So I'm always like, okay, that's cool. Why don't you buy something? Here we're selling this stuff. But like it hits a certain point where you can't, make a living off of just pandering to the whims of the idle rich anymore. You try, but at a certain point you end up sort of like you're just doing everything you can just to stay in one place. It's the Red Queen syndrome or something. And, we have two businesses and we work them constantly, etc. And you do get to this point, you can see how they say the Roman Empire got in trouble when all the like little farmers and serfs and stuff decided, okay, forget it. You're not going to let us have a little farm or do anything. Okay, forget it. We're just going to pull down the gates, pull down the empire. And, you expect people to be into it for a long time. And I love it. I think it's nice and everything, and, I'll admit that when somebody shows up in a Volvo cross country and they look like they're going to buy stuff, I'm like kind of happy about it. I'll admit, I'm just like everybody. I've realized I've moved from working class to kind of petty bourgeois, but I know where I'm at in the world. I don't think that it's going to continue to be wonderful like this, and the people with money are going to have more of it, and eventually they're going to say, okay, we don't want you little people here anymore. In fact, the two richest communities in Maine, Cumberland and Cape Elizabeth, just voted against having any kind of sort of not affordable, but just they're calling it workforce housing in their town. They don't even want it in their town. They'd rather have somebody live somewhere else. But these islands, the problem is there's no place to go. You can't go anywhere else because you're either on the island or you're off the island. So at a certain point, if we don't have some place for us regular middle class, sort of lower middle class people to live, there's not going to be any place to live. So, and we can get pushing us out, but then they won't have anything. They won't have any services. They won't have anybody doing anything. They're going to have to import people from somewhere or something. Anyway, my opinion.
So we have quite a discussion in the YouTube, but there's two main things that people are interested in. One of them, I guess, it's because I didn't include hydrogen in the introduction, and so people are asking about it, even though I know we rehash this almost every time. But basically, hydrogen is a method of storage of energy. While there's theoretical golden hydrogen, it's like deep in the ocean and it's very volatile, and it's hard to get. But and we haven't gotten it yet, as far as I know. But some people are talking about green hydrogen. But the thing with green hydrogen is that it depends on electricity, and we need. And the whole point is that we don't have enough surplus energy, and so we can't really make that green hydrogen. And then hydrogen on its own is very unstable, and so it's actually better to make it into ammonium, and that's Simon Michaux was talking about that whole purple transition. And we figured out there is an easy way, or fairly energy efficient way of turning. So say, for instance, you have the main use case. Say you have a nuclear facility, and that's mostly for industrial purposes, because that's kind of like the only ethical thing. But then sometimes you have, you're not producing solar panels or whatever, and you have extra electricity. Then you could use that to make hydrogen or ammonia. So with certain membrane filters, you can get the nitrogen out of the air, and then with certain kinds of catalysts, you can get that hydrogen to turn into ammonia, and then the oxygen component can bind with nitrogen, and then you can actually make ammonium nitrate, which is plant fertilizer, and so then you can use that in the plants. I don't know if anyone...
Again, flow rate. I mean, Simon,
Yes.
One of the things that you discovered doing the Hawaii report is how much to do hydrogen, you need cheap electricity. for it to be able to fit into the economic machine. And the work that Simon's been doing on the Hawaii report, shows how much of that cheap electricity has to go to trucking, just to trucking, and it's over 80%. So flow rate, again, is like looking at any of these technologies. To me, you've got to look at demand. You got to look at the supply chain, what the demand is and what the flow rate can be, because if the demand is greater than the flow rate, it's going to become expensive.
There's actually a new way through this now. I'm still. This is the purple transition stuff, and Peter, we've yet to actually crash test this. So can we actually break it? There's the purple transition has 3 foundation technologies. One of them is burning iron powder. You take that powder; it's about 100 micron, and so you've got to make it. Yes. Once you've made it, you can recycle it. But when you burn it, you get about 2,000 degrees Celsius, or 1,500 to 2,000. Which means we can do all our manufacturing stuff off that, and then in ways we can't do anything else. Right. If you happen to use the sulfur iodine method of making hydrogen, that can be driven on 800 degrees Celsius, 800 to 900 degrees, which means burning of iron powder could be used to make hydrogen. Now, to recycle the fuel, get this, to recycle the fuel, you can to take the iron oxide powder, which is in rust, and put it into a hydrogen atmosphere to turn it back into pure iron powder, or you could use an electrochemical system. And so the purple transition, you have a thorium reactor generating electricity to recycle, among other things, recycles the iron powder fuel, which then produces hydrogen, which then goes off to a whole lot of other things, including production of ammonia. And then and that goes into the ammonia ICE. But the ammonia ICE has its problems. It can't be used everywhere, only in some things. So you've got a network of technologies that are on top of each other, right? And so there's no one magic bullet, right? There's no that does everything. So you've got to use a combination of technologies and then structure society accordingly. And that's what I'm trying to Peter, that's actually my job, to write this up.
My job is to find any spelling errors.
Peter, I seriously appreciate that, because I'm partially dyslexic and my spell checker is stuck on Finnish, and so I don't see typos. I just don't. So oh my spleen, another typo.
It's not your job.
Anyway, so I
write it, and somebody else will do the spell check.
But what's now forming is what I'm calling the purple transition. I don't know if that's actually the way forward, or is it a stepping stone to something else. But all the technologies I've gotten that have less bottleneck challenges in front of them than everything else I've looked at, including oil, gas, and coal. Right. Now, here's the funny part. They can be run in a decentralized network. A pilot scale unit is all that's needed.
Very good.
All 3 of them.
Mm-hmm. I know I've read a lot that decentralized organizations are the most resilient and most likely to get through collapse and the highest return. They get into reorganization phase the fastest.
Yeah, and so also when you actually look at the historical collapses, this I don't know if this is a hobby of mine, but or not. But it seems to creep into all sorts of work. But when you look at historical collapses, the successful things that ride through don't try and fix the existing system. They build a parallel system off to one side.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes.
And so
I know I've read a bunch of books, or at least one that was talking about collapse and transition, and it's usually the peripheral, the periphery that turns into the new dominant area. So, for example, like there was Kiev, and then they ran out of firewood, and then they moved it to Vladimir, and then they ran out of firewood, and then they moved it to Moscow. And so, like, it's kind of when they run out of energy resource, and it's just like the Roman. It's like there was Greece, and then they moved to what was it called, Macedonia, because they had trees in Macedonia, and then they moved to Rome. It's kind of like the Roman Empire kind of moved that way. or the
And then
Mediterranean.
Rome fell, and the Western Roman Empire kept going. No, excuse me, the Eastern Roman
The Eastern
Empire
Roman,
kept going.
yes, because they
And
moved
the
to
Western Roman Empire,
Turkey. Yeah, that's right.
Turkey.
After Rome,
And that became the big thing.
Yeah.
And they kept going for another
1,000 years.
1,000 years.
Yeah. They had good waterways, so they could collect
Yeah.
from a huge amount. They were basically a port city in between two continents.
Yeah.
Istanbul.
Yeah, so I mean, and then that kind of morphed into the Ottoman Empire, which kept going until World War One.
Yeah.
Sick man of Europe, you know.
And I guess that leads us to the carrying capacity discussion, because people have been really interested in this on YouTube, and I'm going to try and do that.
This is kind of scary, the carrying capacity.
Here, I will get the window up. And then you guys, do you have a comment? Anyone have a comment on it?
So yes, I do.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Peter.
So I look and I look at, for instance, that what the population growth has been, and I look. Okay, so when I was born, the global population was 2.5 billion people. When my father was born, it was 1.85. So since in 100 years, we've added more than 6 billion people to a diminishing carrying capacity. That blows my mind. It's just like, how does anybody expect that to keep going? Especially if if GDP is supposed to continue with double-digit growth every year. Anyhow, that's my bewilderment.
It doesn't. That's the simple answer.
It doesn't. No, right.
So here on the share screen, I have it's this page on list of countries by ecological footprint. But what it has that's quite useful is their listing of gigahectares per person. And so this is the biocapacity. And so here you can see some of the... and in order to have enough to grow your own food and firewood, you need 1 gigahectare per person. Because on half the we had covered that carrying capacity thing earlier. And so if half of that would be growing your own firewood, and then half of it would be growing your food. And in physical terms, in a tropical area, that's about half a hectare. And then a northern place like northern parts of Canada where you can still grow trees, it would be 2 hectares per person. And so you can see Canada has a lot of biocapacity, but this is also the ecological footprint is if we were to grow enough to do all of the things that we do, like driving cars and things like that. And so you see we're using a lot more than 1 hectare per capita here in Canada. And then some people wanted to know, like the United States. So you see they're using a similar amount to Canada, but they only have 3.7 hectares per capita available. And so there's different ways of organizing things, and one of those is if there was some kind of legislation, like China. China is a good example. So they have almost enough per person, 0.94 hectares per person. And they in their system, Leon Mead, I know, joins us and talks about it sometimes, is that in the rural areas, they're called community-owned land. And so if you live in a rural area, you will be allocated land where you can grow your own food and firewood. And then if you move to the city, that allocation will go to someone else that lives in the rural area. and you'll basically like lose it. And that's why they have an annual migration where they at around New Year's, Chinese New Year, they move back to their rural land for a month in order to maintain their rural allotments. And then they do last spring planting or something like that. And now the UK, or what is it called? The United Kingdom. You see, it has very low. It's way over capacity because their temperate climate. Peter, there's some noise behind you here. I'm just gonna mute you.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay. Here, okay. And so, yeah, United Kingdom is not in a sustainable place. They're about double as many people as they can sustain. And that this is if they reduce, eightfold how much energy they're using per capita. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Simon, did you have any comments on this? I know you were doing that rural. I know it's late where you are.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
So 10 years ago, I was in this space and I saw it as the only way forward. And the reason I'm not there anymore is my marriage broke up. And my ex-wife at the time set about a series of character assassination which destroyed the whole community.
Oh.
And so the whole thing just burned to the ground. What I'm just saying is for 10 years I haven't really looked at this, and when I finish writing up the Purple Transition, we're going to go after it again and look at all this. We've got to actually sort of what I'm sort of finding is when you look at things like this, you have this world view, but the practicalities are local. So we're going to go into Hawaii, and we're going to say, so for Hawaii, what can we do? And so there's people in the area who are actually doing this, and we're going to sort of talk to them and develop it further and flesh it out. And Gary, if you're listening, g'day, mate. Yeah. And Andrew, when we get to there, Peter and I could probably use some of your advice as well.
Okay.
So as far as, how do I take this stuff and use it? Because a lot of this stuff in my workspace, when you first look at it looks great, but when you actually sort of get to use it properly, a lot of it's not that useful. You've got to get it into a fan that is useful. If anyone who's actually spent time trying to extract useful information out of an IEA report, they know exactly what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Well, that was one of the questions I had about the data that Andre was just showing in terms of, the what was it, gigahectares per person or
global hectares?
Anyhow.
Yeah.
So, like for instance, here in Hawaii, I mean, we have all but 2 climate zones that exist on the planet. So I live basically in a tropical rainforest, and when the clouds aren't overhead, I can see snow up on Mauna Kea, where we have permafrost. And there are, so like, let me see, I'm looking at my weather station. So this is the, we're going into the second week in April, and we've had 34 inches of rain so far this year. And there are places on the island that are desert that have had 2 inches of rain this year, if that. So, so my question is if you just kind of in a mixed manner, like decide there's this much land per person, what's it good for? What can you do with it?
Yeah. So the global hectares is supposed, from my understanding of how it's supposed to run, is that it's supposed to be based on usable hectares. So it based on equivalence. So if you, for instance, have only 6 months of growing season, then that's 1 hectare. But if you have a full year, then it would count as 2 hectares. This would be the ideal. Like that's how I usually calculate it. Now Hawaii, it says over here that your current population density is 82.6 per kilometer squared, and so that is that would allow about 1.2 hectares per capita, and that is more than enough. That's double what, say, they use in Tacopia. In Tacopia,
Well,
they have half a hectare.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you look at the state as a whole, that may be what it pencils out to. I live on an island that's 4,000 square miles, and we have 200,000 people. You have and the island I live on is larger than the other 6 islands combined, and 1 million people live in an area that's, this just a little bit bigger than Manhattan. So, yeah.
So you're on the Big Island?
That alters. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of ecological zones, so based on my calculations, you can grow food forests anywhere from hardiness zone 2 until which is 2, tropical, and then you need at least 250 millimeters annual rainfall, and then if you have that, then you're golden. I mean, 250 is desert, so that would be cactuses. But if you were closer to 500, then you could grow wheat, and you could grow wide diversity of different kinds of plants like pistachios and trees and things like that. So you would be able to sustain yourself even with just 500. So
the question is how many and how much. Right, so we actually need to work out the actual footprint of that, and then replicate that against the land we've actually got, and how many people that will support. Right, so that's the calculation. We haven't done it yet, so oh well.
Yeah, the Big Island is 19.2 people per kilometer squared. So that is very reasonable. I do notice, obviously not all of this is habitable. You've got like a desert region over here, and then there's the so you basically, in order to get these calculations properly, you're going to have to find out what part is not desert and is not a volcano, and then do the calculations based on that.
There's 2 questions there. First is, could we take the population of the whole state of Hawaii, like the island of Oahu, and disperse them across the other islands? Will that work? Second question is, do we cut into the natural forests, or do we try and make the existing pastoral land work in some form? Because if you wipe out all the forests, then Hawaii will ecologically crash.
Yeah.
Easter Island.
Yeah.
So So these are the things that and it'll be people who actually work the land in Hawaii in this form who'll be able to sort of tell us the true answers to those questions. So that's yes to happen.
And so I agree with you with that pastoral thing. So basically, most of the areas that are used for pastoral, like sheep and cattle grazing, most of those can be turned into quite viable food forests, assuming they have greater than 250 millimeters annual rainfall. And generally, as once you start planting shrubs, your rainfall will increase anyways. And so it could be quite viable. And the model here's Tacopia. Like, do you see this? It looks like heavily forested area. You would think natural, but all of this, absolutely every single square inch of this is a man-made food forest, where they have planted it out their own cassava and guava and bananas and all sorts of kinds of trees, and every single person has their own half a hectare. And so it is, I think that there's lots of people who are not willing. In my experience, people over 50 are not willing to move and start their own food forest or start homesteading agriculture. But it's a good idea to make it available for people who are willing. So Hawaii could have some kind of land distribution system.
So part of the simulation will have to be what equipment will we need? What tools will we need? Right, and so where do they actually get made? And so that'll have to come in the form of imports. and what level of technology. I saw in your description, for example, you had like shortwave radios, and I said, where are they made? They're imported. So for this to actually sort of work, then it needs a massive import of technology in from somewhere else, right? And so that's going to be explicitly stated in the scenario.
Yeah. So I actually wanted to clarify that. So yeah, consider radio, fiber optic, and rail county responsibilities. So ideally, this could actually be made locally, because each municipal area of roughly 55,000 people can support a thorium nuclear reactor, and that would allow it to make silicon chips. And so they would be able to make their own electronics on site.
Yeah, so the infrastructure to do that, the actual factory to do that in its current conventional form, happens in Southeast Asia for a reason. These things are massive.
Yeah.
And there's economies of scale. So all of that has to be sort of thought through.
Yeah, I have actually looked into it, and there's a big difference between how we do it now with the economies of scale, where we're making huge amounts at a time, and then if you were to do custom chips one at a time, you can do that with an electron tunneling microscope, and you can get 10 nanometers chips using an electron tunneling microscope. And that's only an electron tunneling microscope only costs a few $100,000. So it is possible to do kind of a 3D printer of it. It'll only make one custom chip at a time. But for a small enough population, it is, just like we have these 3D printers where we start them and then they'll run for a while. We could do the same thing.
So none of this exists in Hawaii at the moment. That's what I'm saying. So society at the moment is geared to something else entirely.
Yeah.
And so all 7 levels of the industrial system would have to be reinvented in Hawaii in some form, and we would then have to actually have enough people generating food to support the people doing that industry. So I don't know what it will look like yet, but we've got to get all that balanced.
Yeah, and that is a good point in terms of that food. That is one of the first steps, right? And it's also one of the easiest, and you need the least amount of stuff for it. Basically, the main thing you need is to have something like a Land Protection Act that prevents land hoarding. So say, for instance, in Prince Edward Island, we have that, where there's a maximum amount of land that any one landowner can own, and then they also look into all of the corporations to make sure you're not like using a dummy corporation to have land on your behalf. And I know in America it can be politically difficult to do something like this, but it is, in theory, it's a viable thing. And then your current carrying capacity 1.2 hectares per person, so no person could own more than 1.2 hectares unless they had more people on title, like family members.
Right.
And that would make it possible for other Hawaiians to buy land. And then you don't have to go into, say, the Chinese model, where, they're just distributing it based on if you live in that village.
Well, there's Hawaiian homelands. Have you heard of that?
No, I'm not familiar.
That is with the, my wife is Hawaiian, and that's for the native Hawaiians. They actually are able to get a little plot of land on their former country. They can get a piece of Hawaii.
Well,
Little place to live. But I hear that there's a waiting list. It's an enormous waiting list.
yeah, and it's being managed by Hawaiians for Hawaiians, and amazingly enough, there's a waiting list, and your place on that list is sometimes willed to an ancestor or willed to an heir, so it gets passed down through generations. It's moving so slowly. And that, in fact, is a huge issue that has to do with any and all development that goes on here. I mean, we have a culture that does know, that has the skills, both the spiritual skills and the mindset skills to be a part of nature versus being apart from it. And, that in and of itself is a huge issue. I mean, the spirit of aloha is literally written into our Constitution. Now, if we can actually live it, then, that'll be better. But that's far different than what you'll find in Phoenix, Arizona.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, my wife is part Native Hawaiian,
Yeah.
and her family has been on the Big Island and Oahu, and actually Maui also, at different times, and they've lived there. And that it's hard because, like in Oahu, the Native Hawaiians barely hang on to any of it, and they have to live crammed into a small house, with a lot of people, and it's like any city sort of thing, where you have to figure out a way to be able to live there, So it's the other thing is, I know also that a lot of not Oahu, but the Big Island is owned by big corporations, like a big corporate farm kind of thing, a big ranch.
There are quite a few.
Yeah,
Right.
my wife's grandfather used to be a sheriff on the Big Island. He also used to work in one of those big plantations, one of those big cattle ranches. He was a cowboy at a cattle ranch.
So, Andrew, you mentioned you looked into the manufacturing on a small scale
Right.
and manufacturing ships. Could we have a conversation offline about what you found with all that? And if you've got anything written down, could you send it to me?
Sure. Yeah.
And again, anything I use, I'll reference you.
Sure. Sounds good. I'm pretty sure I got it even on Wikipedia. It was very common. They originally started making those chips when they were in the research phase using electron tunneling microscopes.
I haven't actually gone down the rabbit hole on any of this yet, but I do need to do it for small communities at some point. If you're ahead of me,
Sure.
I'll happily
I'll send
get
the
your
info.
assistance. Yep.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I'm just seeing there's been a lot of YouTube activity here.
Yeah, what's happening on YouTube?
We got 35 concurrent viewers and lots of mentions here. Carrying capacity for various subregions. Birth rates are dropping. Yeah, in many places they are dropping. And let's see if there's anyone with a question. Peak coal is touched on by Heinberg and peak uranium by Barty. For peak methane, I'm not sure where to look, though. Does anyone know about peak methane? Let's see. Energy return.
Methane.
Yeah. I know that for methane, it can be deceptive because a lot of it is locked up in clathrates, which are kind of a solid form of methane that is deep in the ocean, and they're kind of just like rocks, distributed all over the place. And so like while they're technically there, it's not economical to have a ship or some kind of submarine going around picking up these rocks of clathrate, because they're hard to distinguish from other rocks. And the main kind of effect is one of the climate feedback loops. As the oceans get warmer, those clathrate rocks just dissolve into methane and it goes up into the atmosphere. And the same thing with the permafrost. How much does carrying capacity decline for each 1% or whatever number decline of BOE energy? We need food, fuel, fiber, skills for growing this stuff. I'm not sure what BOE energy is. Does anybody know?
Barrel of oil.
Yeah,
Barrel of oil. Oh, okay.
equivalent. So that's like natural gas, liquid, liquid fuels and stuff like that.
Yeah. I think the answer to that would depend on how much is being used. Like, for example, we've got this ecological footprint, and then if we look at this biocapacity deficit, okay, so this is basically Luxembourg is using 14 hectares worth of oil or energy, and they only have 1.6 hectare per person there. And so you subtract those two, and you have the difference of that's how many barrels of oil or energy equivalents they're using, and that's all imports. Like the British, the UK, historically they have never been able to maintain a population over 5 million or something like that, and now it's 65 million, before industrialization, that is. And so they're way over carrying capacity. That's one way of knowing. Okay, and so obviously as that declines, you're not able to feed people and keep them warm and provide them with goods. All right, plus transport. Yeah, so in terms of transport, we want to decline transport by moving people to the rural areas. So like this, for instance, this is a rural block. And then these people that live in these hamlets, they never have to leave the hamlet in their entire life if all they need is food and firewood. But they can, for doing their farm implements. So, for instance, your shovel broke. You can go over to your village center with your blacksmith with the biogas that they've made from your poop, and then the blacksmith can fix your shovel and things like that. And that minimizes transportation costs, because this is a, those 15-minute cities. This is a 15-minute community, right here. You can from the village center. It takes 15 minutes to walk to any of the hamlets. And each hamlet is about a 6-minute community. And so it's quite efficient that way. Okay. Yeah. Any comments?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I work professionally in an area where the European Commission is talking about smart cities, and they use the language of 15-minute city,
Mm-hmm.
so, and everything, and hidden in their language, right, when you actually, they put it up, and they mean well when they don't realize they're doing this, but what they're putting up there, it could be the forerunner of quite a dystopian world, and they're using the language to do it. In China, they don't muck around. There's no pretense anymore. You need a passport to leave your 15-minute city. So in other words, the idea of the 15-minute city is actually all about control of human populations. So when we're proposing to do stuff, if we actually use the same language, we might end up getting tarred with the same brush.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, right? That's what I'm trying to say there. A lot of the bollocks behind what we call the Fourth Industrial Revolution, where they want to surveil people inside their own home, none of it's necessary.
You're right.
But they're still pushing it. Yeah, okay, and why is that then? You're now starting to see, for example, in these meetings, the start of the transhumanism movement, where they were sort of recommending things like the Neuralink chip in the brain and the the idea of having a mobile phone mounted in your skull, where they reckon that by 2030 a handheld phone will be completely obsolete, no longer manufactured.
Oh, the joy!
Yeah, guys, just yeah. Anyway, so what I'm trying to say,
it's a novel, and it's there's an author named Dave Eggers, and he's written a book called The Every.
Yeah,
and it's a fabulous journey into where corporations like Google, Apple, and say Amazon, are now one company, and literally you're told, anyhow, read it. It's a fabulous book.
So I was actually considering collecting all the dumb things I keep seeing, and if I was to do a presentation about it, it'd be like a dumbass reads the newspaper, or play stupid games, win stupid prizes, something like that. Like there's guys. So when we're actually sort of putting these solutions on the ground, we should be mindful of as Peter likes to say, language is everything. It is true. The words we use and how we use them really does define what is possible. And so if someone else is doing stupid stuff, could we use different words, please? Asking for a friend.
Yeah, well, I hear what you mean. Like, it's just that, like, originally I had made this presentation to appeal to those county staff, and they've probably heard of that 15-minute city thing. It's just the 15-minute city is not viable because you can't grow your own food there. And if you have that passport system, what's the difference between one of these 15-minute cities and a Warsaw ghetto? They they also were, a high density. It was a 15-minute city. It wasn't that big. You could walk from one end to the other, but they just didn't supply them with food, or they supplied them with very little food. And as oil declines, the ability to supply cities with food is also going to decline. And then here, another related question is, how large can an inland town be without water transport? If food is transported by beast of burden, beast has to eat too. So two answers to that is, the best water is rain water, and so the ideal is using a cistern for rainwater collection. Like in Hawaii, that's quite viable. They have very good rainfall there, and so you can have large cisterns. With the amounts they're getting, definitely enough for both drinking water and some irrigation, definitely for seedlings in the first couple years.
Andrew, what did you say was the minimum desirable rainfall?
500 millimeters.
500 millimeters per year?
Yes, annual rainfall.
Okay, we've had 863 in just over 3 months.
Yeah, Hawaii's very special like that.
Yeah.
Well, one side of Hawaii, the other side is dry.
One side, and we picked well.
Yeah, but the thing is, Hawaii has always been a spot in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So the thing about Hawaii is, the whole reason that people are there is because you could get around in a ship and you could stop off in Hawaii. It was sort of a trans-Pacific truck stop, and has been for a long time.
It certainly could be.
It could be.
It could be, and yeah, that idea has been floated with some great detail with the state. So,
well, my wife's relatives, some of them were Spanish whalers. They ended up there in the mid-Pacific. So people showed up there from all over the place once they were able to get around. So I kind of think. A lot of places, I think that person was asking, how do you move food around and things? I think a lot of places that are on water will do better, but of course there is that problem of the sea level rise as well. So it's hard to tell, what is the ideal spot to be in. But I think near water, but maybe not right on it.
Well, you definitely want to be somewhere with enough rainfall. But I have actually done permaculture plans for people living in deserts, and in America. And the idea there is you actually just need very large swales. So say for instance the drier parts of Hawaii, even if you have 100 millimeters per annually, then what you do is you create a swale. It's basically like kind of a shallow ditch, and then it will collect all the rain across, say, several meters across. So you're increasing the amount that's at the bottom of the ditch. So say for instance you're at 100 millimeters and you need to be at least 500 millimeters. So you make a ditch that's 5 meters wide, and then it will collect it into that 1 meter in the bottom, and then so it'll have that one meter at the bottom, and then you can plant your trees, your pistachios or whatever else. They'll still be drought tolerant, trees, but they will get enough water from the runoff from the sides.
Have you?
Oh yeah.
Andrew, have you? Are you at all familiar with Michael Reynolds and the Earthships development in New Mexico?
Yes, I've heard of that.
I'm familiar with Earthships. I even made.
Yeah, Michael Reynolds is the guy who started. He's the architect who started the garbage quarry. But they, the area in Taos where they are is really high altitude desert, and they are totally off grid with about 8 inches of precipitation a year.
Mm-hmm.
Do they use irrigation? They must use irrigation, because I know that whole area.
They grow
has
food
a lot of irrigation
inside their homes.
Oh, I
And
see.
they use water 4 times. It's really
Yeah.
a fascinating That's Michael, and it's a very interesting methodology he's come up with.
Right. So they could grow food outside their homes too, if they were to make swales, because they still get that 80 millimeters or whatever. So they would need to have 6 or 8 meter wide swale, and then it needs to be on contour. That means the water's not flowing in either direction, so that it sinks into the ground, and then you can plant in your swale like cactuses, as well as mimosas and pomegranates and other things that are drought tolerant. And then he'll be able to grow things outside. And actually, by growing those trees and shrubs, you will increase the rainfall as well, because it creates an atmospheric disturbance, and it produces chemicals that attracts clouds.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that whole area there in northern New Mexico has had a long time irrigation. Like people have lived there for, millennia. But I mean, most recently, they have a lot of little irrigation areas, and they had small farmers that lived in that area that were Spanish and also Native American, and they were able to live there, grow corn, etc. Even up in those high desert areas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
It can certainly be done. I know people have. From that area. A good friend of mine is from, his name is Ray the Soil Guy, Ray Archuleta, and he's very famous for talking about soil health all across the country and actually the world. He's world famous now. He's from that northern New Mexico area, so they're very conscious of what you can do to make the soil produce.
Mm-hmm.
You'll find him on the web. He's all over the place. Ray the Soil Guy.
Ray the Soil Guy.
Ray Archuleta.
Ray Archuleta. There.
Yeah, he's really famous.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the Peace Corps with him in Guatemala.
Oh, wow. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
Certified professional soil scientist.
He's amazing. He's amazing. He just did a documentary called Kiss the Ground.
Mm-hmm.
Kiss the ground.
Yeah. There's a lot of great permaculture people. That's for sure. I think that once Simon gets on this track, there's going to be a lot of interested people to help out with the plans.
Yeah. Well, depends on what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
We've got to draw a line on this report and finish it, because it's standing at about 500 pages now with appendices.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so we can't solve everyone's problems.
Right.
Right, so it depends on what it is we're trying to do in a discrete outcome. At the same time, can it actually sort of help inform people? Like, see, to me, the perfect combination would be a combination of several things together, and this could be one of them. So it's useful in some circumstances, and in other circumstances, different things are useful, and then you network everything together in a circumstantial, site-specific circumstance. It's like what the outcome is there's no magic bullet.
Is your report specifically about Hawaii, or is it about other places?
No, it's about
Hawaii. It's a very interesting place to decide to see if it could become a sustainable place. Yeah.
So like anything, there's some good things and some challenges.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I'm thinking, is this kind of like an initial report where you're going to lay out, these are the possibilities, and then if you guys choose one, then we'll kind of give you a more focused report? Or,
no. So the idea was to get all the first map Hawaii out, like this is what the state of Hawaii is in the target calendar year. And then we were going to say, all right, well, if we're going to phase out fossil fuels, there's lots of ways to do it. There is lots of people who think they have a solution, and let's call them tribes. And so instead of actually picking one tribe over another, we'll put all data on the ground in the report, so everyone has the data now to have an adult conversation around the table. So the people who believe wave power is the solution, great, they've got the data. How many wave machines will you need? The people who think solar power is the answer, right, how many solar panels will you need? And so on. But there are 10 scenarios, each one representing a policy.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So-
And so if we can do it, at the end of the report, we will compare those policies, and it depends how it goes. But it really does sort of depend on where we get. Like a lot of the scenarios so far are showing that you don't have the land in Hawaii to do things the way people think.
Like the
So-
solar panels and.
Well, the scenario HC is about biofuels.
Mm-hmm.
So if all energy is now bio-waste, and if all fuel is now biodiesel and ethanol grown from corn and soy, how much land do you think you need to grow all that
Huge.
biomass
Huge.
to produce that? So that to actually maintain existing production, existing economic activity. And the answer is you don't have enough land.
Yeah.
So that's biofuels will have their place maybe, but you're not going to use them like that.
Mm-hmm. They'd have
and so on.
much more limited. Yeah.
Well, just as a comment, because I mean, this is something, anyhow. Right now, state policy is focused on carbon emissions. And there's no sense of proportion, scale, time, or future supply chain to maintain this. So we're putting in massive battery farms. And so I sit in on a on a discussion. I get to be involved with a number of things, with the state utility and with the county and with the state as well. And I asked, have you done any projection about what a Gen 2 replacement for this technology will be in 10 or 12 years when you have to replace the batteries? And the answer is no. So it's so the focus really is trying to, from my standpoint, is to try to imply or to make implicit the scale. When they say decarbonize the state to be net neutral or net zero, what does that mean? They haven't defined it. They have no idea what it's going to take. This will at least, even if this is off by 100% or 200%, it's still going to be way more than they ever imagined.
Yep. And that's the purpose of the report, to get the discussion happening in a frank, in a honest, let's talk about the facts of the matter kind of way. What are we going to do? Because at the moment there's a lot of ideology and a lot of people shouting at each other, and none of it's that helpful. And what's becoming apparent to me is every single one of the conventional plans won't work. So something unorthodox has to happen. Right? And so if we can capture that unorthodox and imply what that is, the numbers will speak for themselves. But how we actually conclude the report might be a diplomatically difficult thing to underhand, because the numbers will say what the numbers say.
Yeah. I have we've just got about 4 minutes left, and I got another YouTube question here. How many people will have to be retrained as organic horticulturalists, and how fast? And that is one of those numbers. So in pre-industrial societies, the average was about 90% of people, between 80 to 95% of people were living in the agricultural area producing food, for 10% of people living in the urban areas. And whether or not those urban people were doing anything useful. And then in terms of how long, it takes about 5 years for people to transition from the learning curve to growing your own food is 5 years. And so that's another number for you. And then people are wondering, can robots do things? The issue with the robots is they're extremely energy intensive, so you can't do it for you. You have to do it yourself, especially for this agricultural area. If we do have robots, they would be just in the industrial centers, just like we have now in factories. And yeah, so that report sounds quite interesting. Okay, did we have any kind of last things we wanted to cover before we close off for the week or the chat?
I could say, well, because I'm working in this space, right? What I could say is this whole topic evolves fast. The problems are evolving fast, but so are the solutions, right? But there are some things about human nature which never seem to change, right? And so those humans, man, some of them really suck.
Yeah. Well, do you have a more specific example?
I do, but I'm not going to.
Okay.
Because let's just say legal documentation's been drawn up.
Let me say I talked to Elliot Coleman one time, and Elliot Coleman's a famous organic farmer here in Maine. He's written a lot of books and things. And I said, well, we're never going to be able to support as many people if we get rid of industrial agriculture. And he said that the yields on organic land is just as high as it is with industrial agriculture, but it requires a lot more people working the land. So it's, we are going to have to go back to a lot of people working the land very intensively, and then you can get the same yields, but it's not the same. You're not living in the same place.
I think the Russians proved that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and the Cubans. The Cubans were, they were cut off, and they started growing a lot of little gardens in the cities and different places, and they managed to keep themselves going.
And I want to add a clarification to that. So the average yield of the organics would be the same. Just like if you have a permaculture food forest, the average yield will be the same. But industrial agriculture allows, like especially with some of those GMO crops, of a responsive. They respond to fertilizers very well, and so you can actually get like 4 or 5 times as much corn or potatoes or whatever is the genetically modified crop that is good at taking up those nutrients and turning them into calories. So actually, a lot of our calories are, like the average yields. Are different, so they would be based on those hectare numbers that I was giving, whereas with industrial agriculture we're currently able to do more just because of the specialized crops that we have.
Well, with huge input.
Yeah, but all right, so we're going to end now, and so we leave you in the love and in the light of the one infinite Creator. And go forth, therefore, rejoicing in the power and the peace of the one infinite Creator, Adonai. And see you guys again in a couple weeks.
Most excellent.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.